Good Tuesday to you, everybody, in Gov 710. Welcome to week boom 3. How's everybody doing? Are you doing all right now? You're settling into the rhythm of the semester, and you got that pesky participation quiz out of the way and all of that jazz. All right, well, let's talk about what we're going to do this week. But first, a little tea this afternoon. I am sufficiently caffeinated, let me tell you. Let's see, what do we have here? Oh yes, Great Smoky Mountains National Park, located in the center of the country, the most visited of the national parks. Unique topography and flora and fauna. I recommend that you go there if you can. Gatlinburg, Tennessee, that's a weird town. I'm not talking about the people. People are people, and there are good, bad people everywhere. Just the contrast between the Smoky Mountains and that town. Google it. All right, if you can't get there, have a look, and you'll see what I mean. But within the park, there are some areas that, for whatever reason, were not logged during there's heavy logging across the nation in the 18th and 1900s. And there are a couple of areas inside the park that escaped the axe. I don't know why. And there are trees in there that are they're huge. They're as big as around as a house, and they're 300 feet tall. And you really have to go all the way to the West Coast to like Big Sur, and Redwood National Park to see something like that. It is really phenomenal. Also, Great Smoky Mountains, highest concentration of black bears in the United States. And no, the bears, the cuddly, fuzzily, cute little bears, they don't want you. They just want your food. So don't give it to them, and everything will be all right. Okay, let's take a look at what we're doing this week for class. Last week, I posted your instruction sheet for your research paper, and I think, mea culpa, I forgot to post the discussion section in Canvas for you to put your research topics into. Now, I'm going to tell you, I'm not a real stickler. I'm not going to tell you must do this topic, you can't do this topic. Big strokes, whatever topic you pick must have a focus on some pertinent communication question, and it has to have an international element to it as well. So it can't just be, how such and such a story is covered in the newspapers, and I'm just going to pick a country, Saudi Arabia. Okay, and where else? All right, what I need something that goes between one thing and another. And you might be saying, well, wait a minute, Dr. Gardner, Saudi Arabia is a different country. And I'm like, yes, that's true. But global, what I want you to look at is, one place to another. Now, I'm not saying that you must, any phenomenon that you research must be one place or another. But if you were going to do, say, comparative analysis or content analysis, okay? So in the pinned discussions in Canvas, and I will always put the current week's discussion questions, I will always pin them, put them in the pinned area. Excuse me. You will find a posting. I don't even know what the right word is for Canvas. Okay. And it will say paper topics. Yes. And please post your topics there. Post it as a begin a new thread so other people can comment on your topics as well. And I would like it if you would have something, some useful input for at least 3 of your classmates. All right. So paper topics, put them there, comment on what your classmates are doing. And when I say comment, give them some useful feedback. And I think one of the best things you could do, the first things you could do by way of feedback, is to tell them, is there enough specificity in this topic, or is it really vague? Remember, all research is bound by limitations. Okay, that's just the nature of research. There are two limitations that bind all research. All right, time and access. How much time do you have to access the data that you need to complete the research? So, you don't have to cover everything and talk about everything. You cannot pour the ocean into a thimble, as the saying goes. You need to focus. All right. So, in doing so, try to narrow down your topic. Okay. And that is the main thing that I'm looking for. Now, remember, with the papers, the way that this works is you're going to do one paper, but in two parts. And the first part's due February 20th. So you don't want to delay getting going on this. Okay. And then, so for the first part, if you look in the instructional sheet, it'll tell you that, you need to have an introduction, you need to have a literature review, you need to have a methodology section. No draft work, please. Write these sections as if they're complete. Now, why am I doing it like that? Because you're like, whoa, hey, on February 20th, that's kind of coming up pretty soon there, Dr. G. Yes, I understand that, but I cannot give you useful feedback about your writing and your research and how you handle data if the work is draft work, because I don't know. And so I got an email from somebody in the class. I won't mention them in this case. And I said, I'm a little nervous about this. How do I turn in a piece of draft work? Well, in effect, part one with these three sections that I've asked you to do is the draft, but not in draft form. Because what I'm going to do is I'll very carefully grade your writing and your research and your proposed study. I'll give you a lot of feedback. I'll say, don't do this and do this. And then if you change that, and then you don't repeat, or you do repeat, depending on, whichever it is, when you finish the paper, I'll go back and change the grade if the score goes up. If you scored lower on the total paper than you did on part one, I'm not going to ding you for that. But let's just say hypothetically you get an 80 on part one. And then when you do the rest of it for part two and you complete the paper, you change those things that I've pointed out. Say, hey, you don't want to do this. And then you do those things that I point out, hey, you do want to do this. And you get a 90 for the whole paper. I'll go back and change the grade on part one. I'll turn that 80 into a 90. So, kind of, sort of, this is the draft, but no draft work, please. Okay. All right. Okay, let's take a look at what it is you're going to be reading. I want you to get into the Golan text. This is a collection of authors. Okay, you're going to read through and read about some theoretical models. Now, from last week, it was important that you understand why someone is proposing a system, why, and I'll talk about that when I read your answers in the next video tomorrow. Okay, but for this one, so if we're going to talk about communication cross-culturally, all right, it's helpful if we have theoretical frameworks through which we talk about the communication process. One of those that you're going to read about is called living system theory, LST. And the question that I pose to you, maybe it's a little loaded. I ask you, in your opinion, is this a valid model? Is this a real workable model, or is it illuminating that if we look at a communication system, whether it's private or governmental or whatever, using the living systems theory, the living system theory model, does that help, or does that just muddle things up? Is it more smoke than fire? All right. So I want you to take a look at that, and then you tell me. Okay. And then we're going to shift our attention a little bit, and I want you to start looking at what it is how it is, why it is that certain gatekeepers select certain stories. Now, within the theoretical framework, this is framing theory, and framing theory speaks to why certain topics are considered news and why others are not. And not only, as the name implies, framing, put a frame around what it is you ought to see. Those who frame stories frequently also put a frame around how it is they want you to see it. And it's important for you as a communication, especially for you folks in the strategic communications program, to understand this. Tendency isn't even the word, especially when you're dealing with media. This is an addiction. They just can't help themselves. Okay, this habit. And then be able to recognize it, boom, right away, that, okay, yeah, this is how this is framed. So, how is it that stories are selected by the United States? How, for instance, example, international events. What sorts of things, by way of categories, tends to push the selection process towards the top of the list? Okay. And then for the sort of the second half of what you're reading and what I'd like you to think about, as you did with the questions and the readings last week, okay, in which I had you, you started reading Vernon's Adventist World Radio is on the Air, this book that came out of her dissertation. I want you to make this a habit. Whenever you pick up a piece of scholarly literature, I want you to immediately start asking questions about the hypotheses. That is, what is it that the author is out to prove? And then your mind should jump to what data has the author gathered, and I should say prove, test. That's better because we're investigators, not advocators. What's the author out to test, or what are they proposing? What kind of data are they gathering? How do they treat that data? What conclusions do they draw? Now we come full circle. Does the data selected, the method used, and the conclusions drawn answer the hypothesis? Okay, that is an essential skill for you as a communication scholar, because otherwise you drown in a blizzard of papers, and first of all, you've got to really sharpen your instincts to know when someone is either intentionally or unintentionally, because they just employ bad methodology. They're pulling the wool over your eyes. They're telling you a hypothesis is supported when the data that they gathered isn't relevant to that, or how they examine the data is the wrong test to test the hypothesis, or the conclusions that they drew from the data. And this occurs, with things like content analysis, really doesn't support their assertion that the hypothesis is supported or not supported. You got to hone your instincts so you recognize, you can sniff that out as soon as you see it. So for the second part of what I want you to look at this week, I want you to take a look at the hypotheses thrown out by some of the authors that you're going to read. And I want you to ask yourself, and by the way, just because a hypothesis is put out there doesn't mean it's worth reading or worth considering. So one of the things I want you to do is take a look at Golden's 5 hypotheses. And I'm not trying to poke at the author, but seriously, let's ask the question concerning these hypotheses. Are they revealing in any way? Okay. To hypothesize that the dog goes bark, that's not a hypothesis. That's begging the obvious. And this isn't what we're here to do as scholars. So take a look at those 5 hypotheses and ask the question, is there anything that's really worth hypothesizing about here? Or is this something that's pretty well established just through common sense? And I'm not saying it is or it isn't. I want you to figure that out. And this is part of the exercise of you developing a keen instinct as to how to evaluate the veracity, the weight, the usefulness of a piece of scholarly literature. Okay, so those are the objectives for this week. All right, everybody. Remember too that your first presentation is due on February the 5th, and the instructional sheet for that is also over in week 2. You know what I think I'll do, just because what just because maybe I'll put them in the individual assignment sections. Okay. So you know, if you're like, okay, what week was that sheet in, and you can't remember, you can just go over to the assignment sections. All right. So I will do that this week. Okay, everybody. Have a great week. I think about you. I do pray about you. Post your paper topics. Start thinking about what it is you're going to feature for your presentations. Okay. Do the readings, please. Don't post at the 11th hour. All right, because nobody has a chance to have a conversation with you, and you don't have a chance to have a conversation with anybody. And have a great week. All right, and I'll see you on Canvas. Bye-bye.